How am I coming in? Can you hear me? Hello, Elaine. Glad to hear that your surgery is successful. Hope you have a good recovery. Overwhelmed by physical pain. Well, take some rest. Use it as an object to your meditation. And if it's too much, ask for some morphine. We'll give it a couple of minutes, wait for people to arrive. Ah, hello, Tan. Welcome. Innovative Dhamma is Tampamuto, for those of you who don't know who that might be. Maybe you're a bit newer than he used to be on with us a bit more in the past. And when we lived together at the Indonesian Buddhist Vihara in New York, we were on Dhammapalooza in on video together. Yeah, it was over a year ago now. Hello, Douse. I guess we should probably get started. As I suspect ever since maybe daylight savings is not the issue. But the last 2 weeks have been quite low. We had a sudden drop off. So maybe we'll just get started. Ton, I don't know. I don't know what we're gonna do. I haven't spoken. I only mentioned the possibility of us doing a retreat in the mod chat briefly because we haven't settled on anything, so I haven't spoken to anybody about it. Hello, Iceland. Welcome. So let's get started. Let's do the beginning chanting and everything, and then we can get into the getting Dhammapalooza started here. So we are in the chanting book. Hello, Bhavani. Welcome. we're going to chant page 65, dependent origination, paticca samuppada. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Anuloma avidya paccaya sankara sankara paccaya vinyanang vinyana paccaya namarupang namarupa paccaya salayatanang salayatana paccaya passo passa paccaya vedana vedana paccaya tanha tanha paccaya upadana upadana paccaya bhavo bhava paccaya jati jati paccaya jara maranang soka parideva dukkha domana supayassa sambhavanti evametassa kevalassa dukkha kandassa samudayo hoti. Now Patiloma. Avidjaya tveva asesa viraga niroda sankara nirodo. Sankara niroda vinyana nirodo. Vinyana nirodha namarupa nirodo. Namarupa nirodha salayatana nirodo. Salayatana nirodha passa nirodo. Passa nirodha vedana nirodo. Vedana nirodha tanha nirodo. Tanha nirodha upadana nirodo. Upadana nirodha bhava nirodo. Bhava nirodha jati nirodo. Jati nirodha jara maranang soka parideva dukkha domana supayassa nirujjanti. Evametassa kevalassa dukkakandassa nirodho hoti. English. Dependent origination, the arising of the wheel of existence. Dependent on ignorance, volitional formations arise. Dependent on volitional formations, consciousness arises. Dependent on consciousness, mentality and materiality arise. Dependent on mentality and materiality, the sixfold base arises. Dependent on the sixfold base, contact arises. Dependent on contact, feeling arises. Dependent on feeling, craving arises. Dependent on clinging, becoming arises. Dependent on becoming, birth arises. Depending on birth, aging and death arise. And sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Thus there is the arising of this whole mass of suffering. The cessation of the wheel of existence. Through the entire cessation of this ignorance, volitional formations cease. Through the cessation of volitional formations, consciousness ceases. Through the cessation of consciousness, mentality and materiality cease. Through the cessation of mentality and materiality, the sixfold base ceases. Through the cessation of the sixfold base, contact ceases. Through the cessation of contact, feeling ceases. Through the cessation of feeling, craving ceases. Through the cessation of craving, clinging ceases. Through the cessation of clinging, becoming ceases. Through the cessation of becoming, birth ceases. Through the cessation of birth, aging and death cease, and sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Thus there is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends, let's see who's joined us. Welcome Sindhu, Bhavani, and Gautam and Bella. Welcome Jay. Okay, friends, so welcome to another Dhammapalooza, where we have a 2-hour festival of Dhamma consisting of chanting, which we just did. We're going to do meditation later. And in between, it's up to you guys, it's up to the community. We might do some readings. You might have a topic that you'd like me to discuss or the community as a whole to discuss. You might have some questions. So each Dhammapalooza is a little different in this regard, which is why I never put the title. I only put Dhammapalooza and the date because we don't know what each Dhammapalooza is going to be about. After Dhammapalooza closes, then I put in the sutta that we read or the title or you know, the guided meditation that we did. Each time is different. So for the next couple of minutes, if you have any topics you'd like me to discuss, the community to discuss, if you have any questions, if you have anything that you'd like to be as the theme for this Dhammapalooza, then please type it in the chat. And you're more than welcome to talk to each other, to greet each other in the chat, to say hello, to discuss the Dhamma with each other as the Dhammapalooza is going. The chat and the community coming together is part of Dhammapalooza, right? Everybody coming together to share Dhamma with each other. So there's not too many of us today. It's a smaller Dhammapalooza. So we'll see here. We'll give it a couple minutes and see if any questions or anything pop up. I know Bhavani went right off the bat with a question. So we'll give that a minute or two and then see what pops up. So I'll start off with Bhavani's question. This is a very complicated question that has a bunch of different views. And maybe different ways that you can answer it. So the question here, does the mind require body to exist? Hello, Bhante Varapanya, you're welcome. Does the mind require body to exist? What does the Buddha say the mind is? 3 things. Chitta, mano, vijnana. Chitta is the affective aspect of the mind, the emotional aspect of the mind, which is why in Thai forest they translate it as the heart, which is I don't like that translation at all. But you kind of understand where it's coming from. So chitta is the emotional aspect. Mano is the rational aspect of the mind. And then vijnana is consciousness. So these three things are aspects of the mind. You could also say that they're synonyms for the mind. In the suttas, the Buddha will use one or the other, and sometimes he's talking about a specific aspect of the specific Pali word, and sometimes he's just using it um, as a synonym, basically for saying mind. Right? There's no a Pali word that just means mind. He uses chitta, mano, vijnana, these words. And so if you look at dependent origination, right, this is interestingly enough, we just did dependent origination. That was our beginning chant. You see here in the beginning, what do you see? You see that consciousness is dependently arisen. Right after consciousness comes, with the arising of consciousness, comes the arising of name and form, mentality and materiality. And then the Buddha, in another sutta, the Buddha says that one cannot exist without the other. Consciousness cannot exist without Namarupa. And this pretty much makes it easy when you're talking about like humans. It gets a little bit more complicated when you're talking about things like devas, or you're talking about existence in the arupa realms. This is where you get some teachers will say that there is a kind of like a fine material version of the aggregates. Like a human has the form, feeling, perception, mental formations, intentions, and consciousness. And a deva will have those, but it will be very refined. And that's not really something necessarily that you see per se directly in the suttas. It is something that can be inferred, which is why some teachers, like Bhante Silananda, who was a monk at Bhavana for many years, and who I learned from, that's what he would say. So these are one of the questions, does the mind require a body to exist? What do you say about the Arupa realms? What kind of a body is there? Right? This is a very complicated, very debated kind of a question that's not directly and easily answered in the suttas, in the early texts. The Buddha, like when the Buddha says, people ask, well, what is reborn? What goes to the next life? And the Buddha only says, um, in the suttas, the Buddha basically only says the mind. Just the mind goes. He doesn't give us a lot of details of these specific metaphysics because they're not really important. They're not important for the ending of our suffering. What's important is that you have a mind and a body now, and you have the ability to practice now. So practice now. That's the most important thing. And it should also be understood that the Buddha is talking about mind here. Now, when I talk about mind, I'll notice myself pointing to my head, to my brain, because that's where we think of as consciousness, right? The brain is what allows us to understand the world. So the mind is not just physical. That's something that has to be understood. The mind, some people have said it, and they might not be half off, half wrong, that if you want to point to something in the mind, you just point to the whole body. Like, there's not one place where there is mind. Yeah, but it's just a force of habit that when I say mind, I'll point to my head. So we have a few people join since I started answering the question. Right now, if you have any topics you'd like me to discuss, any questions you have for me, then you can put those in the chat. We'll go over that. If not, then we'll do a reading. I have a sutta lined up for us as always. I always come with a sutta. Steve has a question. I have been wondering if you could talk a little more about the devas and the other spiritual realms. My understanding is hazy. So, what should be understood is that there are innumerable ways of existence in the universe, or multiverse, or wherever, other dimensions. Who knows? Who knows really what's out there? But there's so many ways and so many forms. Even the Buddha gives a little bit of he says like those born of a womb, those born of an egg, those born spontaneously. Right? He gives a little bit of some categorization of all the ways that beings can be born. There's many, many ways. And so for me, when you understand these different, there's so many ways that beings can exist, then of course that it's like, well, why not? Sure, devas, whatever. Devas, yakas, beings on some other planet in some galaxy a million light years away, a billion light years away. Who knows what beings are out there? Who knows what being I'll be in my next life? Who knows where I'll be in my next life? There's just different forms of existence. Like on Earth, we can see millions of different forms of existence. You know, some many forms of existence. Some people say that there's more forms of existence we haven't found on Earth yet than we have, especially in the ocean. So just in this planet, there's unbelievable amounts of ways you can exist. And that's what a deva is, just another being. That's what a ghost is, a peta. It's a being born into that state of existence. Same as a human, same as an alien, same as a snail, and whatever beings that are conscious enough to be sentient. And that's all they are. That's all devas. That's what they are. They're just another being. Nothing special. Nothing very different. They're just a being like you in samsara. That pet that you had growing up, or you have now, you're no different than that pet. At core, there's a mind with greed, hatred, and delusion. You just have one form and they have another. You're simply just a being, a bundle of processes that, due to causes and conditions, continues to be born. That's all. Many different ways of life in this samsaric existence. Are we still on? I haven't seen the chat moved, so I'm just checking to see. All right. The Buddha even demotes the Brahmanical creator god. He puts Brahma also as a being in existence. And also so is Mara. In past lives you've been a Brahma, in past lives you've been a Mara, past lives you've been a human, past lives you've been a dog, past lives you've been a sentient spider being on planet Omicron Persei 8 in some galaxy somewhere. It's just that's how it goes. If you practice the Arupa jhanas, you can be a purely mind-made being that exists out in the darkness of space for like 84,000 years or something like that. That's what they say. So it's just a diversity of ways of existence and living. Sean asks a question here. It's a philosophical question, so we can get a definition. Because this is a very important definition. Determinism. That there is no free will. Everything is determined. Hello, Adriana. Welcome. So this one's easy. Yes, we have the ability to make decisions. The Buddha very clearly shows us that we do have, at the very least, a limited free will. The things that are determined are determined because of our actions of the past. That they're not determined from like a creator God or somebody else, somebody else or something else, or just the universe determines something and then you become it or you experience it. No. Buddha is very clearly actually that it is our actions of the past. Our actions of the past set the groundwork, create the causes and conditions for who we are and how we are now. And our actions of the present set the groundwork and the conditions for who and how we will be in the future. If you see the five remembrances, the five subjects of contemplation, remember the five. I'm subject to old age. I'm subject to illness. I'm subject to death. I'm not exempt from these things. I'll be subject to everything that I love. Also, uh-oh. Oh, is the connection still going? Can you guys still hear me? We had a couple hiccups last week too, but okay, we're still going. All right. So I was going over the five subjects of contemplation. The fifth one is probably the most important. I am the owner of my actions, heir of my actions, have my actions as my relative, my actions as my resort. Whatever I do, for good or bad, that I shall be the heir. It would be kind of a horrible experience if the Buddha says you're subject to your actions, but you have no control over them or ability to change them. There would be no Buddhism. There'd be no path to follow. There'd be no practice. What are you practicing for? It's just all determined. In many ways, that's kind of nice. It would be like the Norse Viking belief that everything that will happen to you, your birth and your death and everything in between was written down by the All Father. And when you die, you die. It's just your time. Right? That's kind of nice to think about it that way. It's like makes you worry less. But even still, your actions determine, like if you go to Valhalla and things like that, there's still some kind of ability to choose. I think that, when we talk about there not being a permanent self, that this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. We and we talk about how what we tend to cling to self is just processes. We tend to kind of go a little bit too far and just say, "Oh, well, they're just processes and they're just unfolding as they will." And that's not the full story though. The full story though is that you have the ability to choose no matter how you're born. No matter the circumstances of your birth, your life, you have the ability to choose how you want to live. Do you want to live skillfully or unskillfully? Beneficial to yourself and others or harmful to yourself and others? Now, of course, those choices are conditioned. That's why you have to build up your habits and build up your ability to make good choices. Very small, like baby steps. Hey, if you want to quit smoking or quit overeating or quit whatever, quit drinking, you can't just say, "Okay, now I decide that I will quit." That doesn't exist. Even if you really tried to use your, um, what's the word? Willpower. I will use my willpower. Willpower is one of the most finite and weak muscles that most people have. You can train it and build it up that maybe you can have stronger willpower that lasts for longer. But willpower is uses lots of energy. Willpower is like running. It's like sprinting. Whereas like a Buddhist master, like somebody who's practiced so that like they've basically just been able to kind of let go of all of it. They're just like walking nice and calmly. There's no struggle to it. There's no effort needed. There's no strong force of will because they've set the groundwork. They've used dependent origination um, to their own benefit. They understand, okay, well, this is my goal right up here. This is my goal. Now, what do I need to do? What steps do I need to take? What processes do I need to put in motion? What groundwork do I need to set to get to that goal? And then the day to day, you're all here. You're down here, setting all the groundwork, doing all the, setting the conditions and building the habits. And then that gets you up to there, slowly but surely. Not by forcing it, not by force of willpower. You might get up there a little bit, but then you fall down. That's the way it is. So you need to um, put your free will, put your will in the places that will allow you to get to where you want to go. Right? Free will is more about almost like setting an intention than just I decide and this is what I'm going to do and then I go there. Anybody who's ever tried that knows that that's not how it works. You start down the path, a straight path, and then the path goes zigzaggy. Maybe eventually maybe in the zigzag you're moving in the direction you want, but it's not going to be a straight path. Dowse is saying that Valhalla is greater than Nibbana. Well, there is a Buddhist Valhalla. There is the heaven of warriors. So if you really wanted to go to Valhalla, you could. Um, but it's not going to really get you anywhere. You're still stuck. All right. So there is a question from Sindhu. Steve says, I'll watch Star Trek with more credulity now. Probably not, because honestly, we can't really imagine what aliens would be like. We can only use what we know from Earth. But, just putting on some prosthetics and coloring your skin blue or purple or green is not gonna have much credibility. All right, so Sindhu has a question. Oh, it's kind of like what we were just talking about, actually. Bante, every day is a struggle to overcome habitual action, getting ruled by the mind based on perception, based on the past. How do we keep the will on keeping on trying? I know the Dhamma path will lead to the enlightenment. I understand and trust, but sometimes very discouraging if you cannot overcome your habitual patterns. So, there are some habitual patterns that you will overcome on your path. I mean, I've been doing this 17 years now, and there are some that I have overcome, and there are some that are so deep that I probably won't overcome until I'm almost awakened, whenever that will be. Um, like for instance, I always joke that the one of the last things to go before I become awakened will be my food issues. Right, you guys know all my history of emotional eating and eating as a friend and depressive eating and all kinds of eating issues. Right, this is something that I made a lot of progress on being able to be mindful and understand and investigate it, but I haven't overcome it yet. I'm moving in the general direction, but I have my zigzags. And it's very easy, especially if have like a negative mind state or something like that. It's very easy to just jump to, oh yeah, food. That'll make things feel better. Even though I've trained my mind for so many years. And that's because this is a strong thing to me. For somebody else, it might be alcohol. I mean, I drank a bunch in college, and a little bit afterwards, but I was never really a big drinker. It wasn't my thing. Um, when I became a Buddhist and I gave it up, it was like that was easy. It was like there was not a day of struggle that I gave up alcohol. Right? But for somebody else, it will be that will be their thing. So there's just things that you have to kind of understand and come to terms with the fact that you have a long road with this. It's a lifelong road. It's just the way it's going to be. It's a very strong habit. It's a very strong defilement. And it's going to take you years of investigating it, years of watching it to overcome it. Like what, 3, 4, maybe a 4 or 5 years ago, I had this experience of bhavana where I wanted to, I was fighting going to the refrigerator to get some food at night. And of course, this skillful, like, well, you don't need to, you're a monk now, such and such, all these things. But I was in a very strong negative mind state. And I remember this so vividly because it was the first time in my life I really was able, kind of like the first time I really understood that I was not controlling my breath when I was watching it. It's so vividly like, wow, that it stays with you. And so I remember literally watching myself get up and move. And I tried to will my body to go back to my room, and I literally couldn't do it. It was like something hijacked my body. A part of my mind hijacked my body, and it's like, we're going to get this food. Even though, the part of me that was most conscious of what was happening was like, no, we don't need it. It's okay. I literally observed and watched my body and my mind get up and go to it. Even though the part of me that was most conscious was like, I don't need this. I'm going to try to use my will to stop this from happening, but I couldn't. And of course, I've done that thousands of times in my life. But that was the first time I really was able to see it so clearly that it was totally out of my control in that moment. I couldn't do anything about it. It was a really amazing thing, because it really showed me the depths of how deep this goes. And it showed me a lot of, there was a lot of humility there and a lot of compassion of, well, I'm not there yet. It's just the way it is. So you have to understand this, that this is going to be not a short-term thing. This is going to be a long-term thing. You're going to have to find ways to develop and to maintain your morale, your confidence, right? Your desire to keep moving forward so that you can maintain. And so one of the reasons I tell you the story and everything is, and the mindset is, the mindset is important. The mindset of, this is going to be a lifelong thing. This is not going to be right, next year. I'm going to set a New Year's resolution, and then by the next New Year's resolution, I won't be doing this habit. No, that's not how it works. That does not exist. Very, 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 very small, very rare people might be able to do that because the causes and conditions are there for them to be able to do it. But for most people, it's not that way. So it's a matter of understanding the habit that you have to do that. Even if all you can do, like that situation I told you, right? I was along for the ride. My body, they were going to the food, to the refrigerator. So what could I do? The only thing I could do is investigate it. The only thing I could do is use my mindfulness, use satipatthana to, okay, what can I learn from this? Let me investigate this. What is going on in my mind right now? What is the tone of my mind? What is going on in my body? Right? To investigate it as deeply as I can in that moment. And so as you do that over and over and over and over thousands of times, you gradually gain insight into it. You gradually see things, small things, little pebbles at a time. And over years of practice, then you understand it more, and you're more skillful with it, but you haven't overcome it yet. And then maybe one day you overcome it. You say, okay, well, this is in the past. Now I still have to work on the other 10,000 bad habits that you know, that I have to work on. One down, 10,000 more to go. It's a long pray. You have to, you have to be in it for the long run. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Adriana uses my tagline, you always have a choice. Yes. Yeah. And the more mindful you are, the more you develop your wisdom and insight, the more opportunities and choices you see that you have. A clouded mind does not see what is in front of them. Sean, yeah, I answered a little bit of your question, but there is a little bit of a difference there, that I can address. Should we work on relieving ourselves of cravings themselves if they are particularly troublesome, or should we focus on the causes of cravings always? So what I would say is you should always do your best to mitigate the damage that you do with it. Right? If you have a tendency to get angry a lot, even though you might not be able to overcome that anger for, for another 15 years, you still want to try to minimize the damage you do with that anger to yourself and others. You might not be able to do much, but you can try to at least try to do as little as you, as much as you can to mitigate that. And you actually also investigate while you're doing that, because you tried to apply, it's like you tried to apply a Band-Aid on a wound, and then you see, well, that Band-Aid didn't work. Maybe I have to try something else. So that's insight. You gained insight. You you gained a little bit of insight into your issue there. So trying to figure out techniques and methods and ways of skillfully managing an issue gains as much, gains insight as much as also investigating the craving as well. Investigating the craving is really investigating the origin. You want to be able to see how something arises. How did this anger arise? What was the trigger? Why did it arise? What was the mind state that was there when the anger arose? You observe all of these different aspects of the mind. And then as you do that, you start to see the origin. And you can apply techniques earlier, which leads to more skillful reactions, which leads to more skillful ability um, to use that, use skillful techniques so that you can minimize damage done to yourself and others. It's a slow, gradual practice. There's no easy way. As the old Rocky song goes, there's no easy way out. There's no shortcut home. The third line, though, is not a Maggasekha line. Third line is giving in can't be wrong. And I say, yes, it is wrong. Don't give in. You can have lots of compassion for yourself. You can take a break. You can do a tactical retreat for a little while, but then you go back into it. You don't give up permanently. Dallas, yes, the Noble Eightfold Path is a shortcut, sure. I mean, technically, that is true. You could be, if you're not following the Noble Eightfold Path, you're going all kinds of ways. You're going the long ways. The Noble Eightfold Path is a pretty long way too, though. It's a shortcut, but it's not easy. That's for sure. Adriana's question here. Bante, what has helped you to stop going through the motions of the day and instead have more sati and inner reflection? Well, I spoke about that a bunch when we just spoke here. Investigation. Have the mindset that anything that you can do, any experience you can have, you can use mindfulness. You can investigate it. There's not a time. There's not a place. There's not an experience. There's not a phenomena that you can investigate. You have to train your mind. You have to start with that mindset. Start with that attitude. Train it every day. Right before you go to work, stop at the door and remind yourself, everything I experience today, I can investigate. I can train my mindfulness with everything. Mindset has to come first. And when you have that mindset, you realize, I've always had the mindset that the universe and the world is like, because I've always been a very curious person. I've always been a truth seeker, somebody who likes to investigate the universe. And if you have that mindset, there's not there's not a bazillion lifetimes enough of like you could take a million lifetimes and you still would experience and investigated such a small fraction of what is there in existence. There's a never-ending ability to investigate, a never-ending ability to observe. So if you have the mindset that it's always there, well then, and you remind yourself of that, you build that mindset, you make that mindset a habit, then your mind will go off with that. Your mind will automatically just, oh, well, this reminds me, I was watching my niece and nephew earlier, and I was getting, we're okay, we have to clean up these things, and we put on the cleanup song. And as soon as the song hit, like before they'd be like, oh my God. As soon as the song hit, they were so excited. And I made it a game too. I said, okay, let's see who's going to be the first one to clean up the most. And like the conditioning was there, and boom, and now all of a sudden we're all cleaning everything up. This is this is how it goes. This is how it works with us too. The mind, you train it, you train it, you train it, you train it, and then something comes up. The mind's like, oh, this is interesting. Let me investigate this. You train. That's how you train. Investigate. Examine. However you like. I like the word investigate because it implies an activity. Like you are actively trying to do this. You are actively trying to search. You're actively trying to see. And then once you have that mindset, you have to train yourself to remember to be mindful. Because you can start out today, yeah, I have the mindset, I'm going to investigate everything. And then it's 5 o'clock and you investigated nothing. You just got swept up like we do with social media, right? Like I remember I got on I was doing when I was doing my work this morning, I got on Facebook to do something specific, but then two or three other things came to my mind and I was doing other things. And like 5 minutes later I realized, wait a second, I followed this path to do this. But then I got distracted by all these other things and went down all these other paths. Now I have to backtrack. I lost my mindfulness there for a minute. So now I come back. Okay, now I come back. Marshal my mindfulness. You know what marshal means? Like marshal means like to bring together, to come back, to be fully aware, to bring your mindfulness fully functional, to marshal your mindfulness, like to marshal your troops. And then you start again. You practice again. And many times, because I've done this for so long, there's a part of my mind that will be like, hey, Jayasara, hey, Jayasara, remember you know that whole mindfulness thing? You're supposed to be mindful. Remember that? And then my mindfulness would just naturally arise. I did not will it at all. Just something triggered my investigation. My mindfulness arose. because I trained it that way. Sindhu is being very kind. She says, I guess since I understand Dhamma. Who says I understand Dhamma? I mean, I understand it more than most people, maybe. But on the hierarchy of people who understand Dharma, I'm pretty low. Um, and especially when you start to include the Arya Sangha. The only being who fully understands the Dhamma is the awakened one. All right, so we are an hour in. Chat's quiet. Maybe we'll read. Maybe we'll read a small sutta, and then we'll do our meditation. I'll save. I wanted to do the sutta, the analysis of non-conflict, which is interesting sutta about how to live with other beings, but it's pretty long. And I don't know if we have, well, let's see. Nah, you know what? Actually, let's do it. Let's do the analysis of non-conflict. I think we can do it within 20 minutes or so. This is the sutta. All right. This is Majjhima Nikaya number 139. So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There, the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, venerable sir, they replied. The Buddha said this: Mendicants, I shall teach you the analysis of non-conflict. So the Pali word here is arana vibhangang. Vibhanga is analysis. Arana is non-war battle sin or fault. So this is the analysis of not fighting. Listen and pay close attention. I will speak. Yes, sir, they replied. The Buddha said this. This is an interesting place to start. Now, of course, obviously, the Buddha is not really talking. I mean, he is, but he isn't. You shouldn't really kind of necessarily apply this to like global geopolitics and things like this. This is talking about really individuals, although technically this does scale. I mean, you know, the reason for most things in the world is because we're a bunch of humans with greed, hatred, and delusion. So Pretty much you could pretty much point to that as the cause for all issues in the world. But all right. So the Buddha starts out with don't indulge in sensual pleasures, which are low, crude, ordinary, ignoble, pointless, and don't indulge in self mortification, which is painful, ignoble, and pointless. Avoiding these two extremes. So you have the two extremes of like nihilistic hedonism on one end and total asceticism and self mortification on the other. Buddha does not approve of either of these extremes. Avoiding these two extremes, the realized one woke up by understanding the middle way of practice, which gives rise to vision and knowledge, and leads to peace, direct knowledge, awakening, and extinguishment. Know what it means to flatter and to rebuke. Knowing these things, avoid them and just teach Dhamma. So again, two extremes. Buttering up somebody, flattering them, yes-menning them, and rebuking them, yelling at them. Avoid the two extremes. So the word here is to disparage. So this is more than just like saying, hey, this is not admonishment. This is not like just saying, well, you did something wrong here. This is like another level beyond that. Disparaging. Know how to assess different kinds of pleasure. Knowing this, pursue inner bliss. I'm not a big fan of this translation only because it's very similar, like the what you call it, Joseph Campbell, the guy who wrote the Hero with a Thousand Faces, all like the hero journey stuff, which is amazing, and which definitely coincides a lot with Buddhism. I mean, it definitely. I mean, in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, one of the people that he uses as an archetypal hero's journey is the Buddha. So it's in there, but inner bliss, the other thing is pursue your inner bliss, and I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing in terms of Buddhist perspective, but this is like inner contentment, inner peace, inner pleasantness. So the Buddha is saying here there's pleasure that you gain from external sources, and there's pleasure that you gain from internal sources. And so the Buddha says, pursue the internal source. Don't talk behind people's backs and don't speak sharply in their presence. Again, two extremes, behind the back and presence. And either way, speaking in a unskillful way towards them, not so good. Don't speak hurriedly. Don't insist on local terminology. And don't override normal usage. So this line here is a very well-known line, a very famous line, especially in relation to teaching the Dhamma in multiple languages. So we see here that the Buddha does not create like a Buddhist language, like we have today where the monks chant Pali or the monks chant Sanskrit and like this is the language. Buddha says no such thing like this. This is the holy Buddhist language. No. Buddha says, don't insist on local terminology. Don't insist on this ancient terminology from India as the only way somebody in America can learn Dhamma. Right? You have to teach people in their language. No, I don't. I am of the agreement with the Theravada tradition that you should also maintain the old language, because this is how you actually really understand deeply the teachings. So you don't throw away the old language, but if I came on here and I just spoke in Pali to you guys, you're not going to learn much. Don't insist on local terminology and don't override normal usage. This is the recitation passage for the analysis of non-conflict. Don't indulge in sensual pleasures, which are low, crude, ordinary, ignoble, and pointless, and don't indulge in self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, and pointless. That's what I said, but why did I say it? So the Buddha, as he often does, gives the short, the outline, and now he's going to go into more detail explaining each section. Pleasure linked to sensuality is low, crude, ordinary, ignoble, and pointless. Indulging in such happiness is a principle beset by pain, harm, stress, and fever, and it is the wrong way. Breaking off such indulgence is a principle free of pain, harm, stress, and fever, and it is the right way. Indulging in self mortification is painful, ignoble, and pointless. It is a principle beset by pain, harm, stress, and fever, and it is the wrong way. Breaking off such indulgence is a principle free of pain, harm, stress, and fever, and it is the right way. Don't indulge in sensual pleasures, which are don't indulge in self mortification. This is what I said, and this is why I said it. Avoiding these two extremes, the realized one woke. Since we're halfway through our half hour already, and we're not halfway through the sutta yet, I am going to look to ellipse some things, um, so that we can at least get as much of the way through the sutta as we can. Avoiding these two extremes, the realized one woke up by understanding the middle way of practice, which gives vision and knowledge and leads to peace, direct knowledge, awakening, and extinguishment. That's what I said, but why did I say it? It's simply it is simply this noble eightfold path. That is right view, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and immersion. Avoiding these two extremes, the realized one woke up by understanding the middle way of practice, which gives vision and knowledge and leads to peace. So the Noble Eightfold Path is the middle way. It is the middle way between two extremes. Know what it means to flatter and to rebuke. This is what I said, but why did I say it? And how is there flattering and rebuking without teaching Dhamma? In speaking like this, some are rebuked. Pleasure linked to sensuality is low, crude, ordinary, ignoble, and pointless. All those who indulge in such happiness are beset by pain, harm, stress, and fever. And they are practicing the wrong way. Notice how the Buddha did not say they are practicing the wrong way before. He's adding this on in the example of rebuking. Buddha is not personally attacking the person. He's simply talking about that this path leads to suffering. So that's the important distinction to notice there. All right, in speaking like this, some are flattered. Pleasure linked to Sensuality is low, crude, ordinary, ignoble, and pointless. All those who have broken off such indulgence are free of pain, harm, stress, and fever, and they are practicing the right way. Like, oh, I'm practicing the right way. My way is the best way. All these other ways are no good. They should run off and rescue their thesis. In speaking like this, some are rebuked. Indulgence in sensual self mortification is painful, ignoble, pointless. All those who indulge are practicing the wrong way. And speaking like this, some are flattered. Indulging in self mortification is painful. All those who do not are practicing the right way. In speaking like this, some are rebuked. All those who have not given up the fetters of rebirth are beset by pain. They are practicing the wrong way. In speaking like this, some are flattered. All those who have given up the fetters, etc., they are practicing the right way. That is how there is flattering and rebuking without teaching Dhamma. And how is there neither flattering nor rebuking and just teaching Dhamma? You don't say, so pay attention. You don't say pleasure linked to sensuality is low, crude, ordinary, ignoble, and pointless. All those who have indulged in such happiness are beset by pain, harm, stress, and fever, and they are practicing the wrong way. Rather, by saying this, you just teach Dhamma. The indulgence is a principle beset by pain, harm, stress, and fever, and is the wrong way. There's a difference. You're rebuking the person versus you're teaching Dhamma. This is why it's very important for us to not to be very careful in judging others. It's a very thorny, delicate thing to judge another person. It's almost always much better to just focus on what you're doing in your own practice, right? Not needing to go externally to engage and to fight and to debate and to see who's the best, to see who is flattered and who is rebuked. You don't say pleasure is linked to sensuality, is low, crude, ordinary, ignoble, and pointless. All those who have broken off such indulgences are free of pain, harm, stress, etc., and they're practicing the right way. Rather, by saying this, you just teach the Dhamma. Breaking off indulgence is a principle free of pain, harm, stress, and fever, and it is the right way. And again, what are you doing? Think about it like I think about this in terms of my career, right? Every time I was in somebody's house, there were two factors. How do I make sure that I always de escalate? And how do I make sure that people understand what I'm trying to put across? The minute you go into you this, you that, you automatically put somebody on a defensive. So de escalation and avoiding putting somebody on the defensive. That's what the Buddha is saying here. This is how you should share Dhamma. This is how you should be with people. You don't say indulging in self mortification is painful, etc., etc. Rather, by saying this, you teach Dhamma. The indulgence is a principle beset by pain, harm, stress, fever, and it is the wrong way. You don't say indulging in self mortification is painful. All those who have broken off are practicing the right way. You simply say breaking off the indulgence is a principle free of pain, harm, stress, and fever. It is the right way. You don't say all those who have not given up the fetters of rebirth are beset by pain, harm, stress, etc. They are practicing wrongly. Rather, by saying this, you just teach the Dhamma. When the fetter of rebirth is not giving up, rebirth is also not given up. Dependent origination. You don't say all those who have given up the fetters of rebirth are free of pain, harm, stress, etc. They are practicing rightly. Rather, you say when the feather of rebirth is giving up, rebirth is also given up. That's how there is neither flattering nor rebuking in just teaching Dhamma. Know what it means to flatter and to rebuke. Knowing these things, avoid them and just teach Dhamma. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. Know how to assess different kinds of pleasure. Knowing this, pursue inner bliss. That's what I said, but why did I say it? There are these 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. What 5? Sights known by the eye that are likable, agreeable, desirable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. Sounds known by the ear, smells known by the nose, taste known by the tongue. Touches known by the body that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. These are the 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. The pleasure and happiness that arise from these 5 kinds of sensual stimulation is called sensual pleasures, a filthy, common, ignoble pleasure. Such pleasure should not be cultivated or developed, but should be feared, I say. Now take the mendicant who, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, enters and remains in the first jhana, which has the rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. As the placing of mind and keeping it connected are stilled, they enter and remain in the second jhana, the third, the fourth. This is called the pleasure of renunciation. Again, renunciation here not meaning becoming a monastic. It's renouncing sensual pleasures, renouncing the hindrances. A temporary renunciation and also a gradual permanent renunciation as you go along the path. Such pleasure should be cultivated and developed and should not be feared, I say. Know how to assess the different kinds of pleasure. Knowing this, pursue inner pleasure, inner sukha. That is what I said, and this is why I said it. Don't talk behind people's backs, and don't speak sharply in their presence. This is what I said. But why did I say it? When you know that what you say behind somebody's back is untrue, false, and harmful, then if all possible, you should not speak. When you know that what you say behind somebody's back is true, correct, and but harmful, then you should train yourself not to speak. When you know that what you say behind someone's back is true, correct, and beneficial, then you should know the right time to speak. When you know that your sharp words in someone's presence are untrue, false, and harmful, then, if at all possible, you should not speak. When you know that your sharp words in someone's presence are true and correct, but harmful, then you should train yourself not to speak. When you know that your sharp words in someone's presence are true and correct and beneficial, then you should know the right time to speak. Don't talk behind people's back and don't speak sharply in their presence. This is what I said and why I said it. Don't speak hurriedly. This is what I said, but why did I say it? When speaking hurriedly, the body gets tired, your mind gets stressed, your voice gets stressed, your throat gets sore, and your words become unclear and hard to understand. When not speaking hurriedly, your body doesn't get tired, your mind doesn't get stressed, and your voice doesn't get stressed. Your throat doesn't get sore, and your words are clear and easy to understand. Don't speak hurriedly. That is what I said, and this is why I said it. Don't insist on local terminology and don't override normal usage. That is what I said, but why did I say it? And how do you insist on local terminology and override normal usage? It's when in different localities the same thing is known as a plate, a bowl, a cup, a dish, a basin, a tureen, or a porringer. And however it is known in these various localities, you speak accordingly, obstinately sticking to that and insisting. This is the only truth, other ideas are silly. That's how you insist on local terminology and override normal usage. And how do you not insist on local terminology and not override normal usage? It's when in different localities there's the same thing is known as a plate, a bowl, a cup, a dish, a basin, a tureen, a porringer, and however it is known in those various, you speak accordingly, thinking it's referring to this. Again, speaking to people in their language, whether it's like literal, like different language or just in ways that they can understand. That's how you don't insist on local terminology and don't override normal usage. That's what I said, and this is why I said it. All right. So I think we're good. We still have a good amount of left of the sutta, but our time is coming close to the end, or at least the last half hour. So we want to do our meditation. No Dhammapalooza until midnight. Even if I was in a place by myself, there'd be like myself and maybe one other person by 10:30. No, very few people. Maybe like once or twice a year we can try something like that. But we'd have to have multiple monastics or multiple people like speak. I can't speaking for an hour and a half, 2 hours is already more than enough for me. I'm already throat is dry and sore, just like in the sutta. So let's do our meditation. Close your eyes. Put yourself in whatever position is comfortable and stable for you. Let's take a few minutes to scan through the body, starting from the feet up to the head. As we scan through each part of the body, we want to check for two things. Check to see how the balance of our posture is affected by the position of that part of the body, and also to see if there's any small feelings of discomfort so that you can adjust your posture now and minimize larger feelings of discomfort later on. So start with your feet. If you have trouble coming into contact with a sensation, you can wiggle your toes. As you're scanning through the body, you want to become aware and focus in on whatever sensations and feelings arise in that part. Bring your awareness through the ankles and up into the calves, through the knees and into the thighs, to the hips and pelvis. Can bring your awareness up through the spine. Check the posture of the spine, that it's not leaning and slouching, but in its natural neutral position. Observe going up through the abdomen to the chest, checking that the shoulders are hanging loosely, and down through to the elbows and hands. And finally, to your head, checking that the chin is parallel to the ground. The head is not slouching or leaning here and there. And when you're ready, let the body go and take 3 deep breaths. Then let the breath go. From here on in, try not to manipulate or control your breath in any way. This body's been breathing from the moment you were born and will continue to do so until the second you die. Doesn't need you to do its job. Your job is simply to observe, investigate, and abide with the breath. Watch as the body breathes in, watch as the body breathes out. As you're following your breath, your mind will become distracted. It will run away from the breath to the past or the future, across the world or the universe, or an external distraction will arise that will take the mind from the breath. Whenever this happens, however many times it happens, acknowledge you've been taken away and marshal your mindfulness. Then practice letting go of the distraction by neither getting agitated and pushing it away, nor by getting excited and grasping onto it. And then return to the breath. Acknowledge, let go, and return. every once in a while. Check in with the state of your mind. Is your mind becoming more calm and tranquil or not? As your mind becomes more calm and tranquil, you may begin to notice more subtle characteristics of the breath. Sometimes the breath is long and deep, sometimes short and shallow. Do your best to observe these changes. Watch how the breath flows, changing differently. Observe impermanence in the breath. Slowly begin to open your eyes, move from the internal to the external, the room around you. Come fully back and aware to your bodily presence. And we've come to the end of another Dhammapalooza. We'll do some of our housekeeping before closing up with our sharing of merit. So just as a reminder, Monday through Fridays, morning monastery experience at 8 a.m. if you'd like to join us for a half hour of some chanting and a little bit of Dhamma to start the day. 8 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday on this channel. Every Wednesday, I put out an Ask a Bhante video. So if you have any questions that you would like to submit for that Ask a Bhante series so that we can have people um, who can check those videos in years to come to answer, to see my response to the various questions. If you're interested in learning and practicing via the early texts, you can join our Maggasekha Discord community by sending out an email to maggasekha@gmail.com. And I think that is about that. Dukkha patta chane dukkha, bhaya patta chane bhaya, soka patta chane soka, hontu sabbe pipaniyo, etavata cha mehi sampatang punya sampatang, sabbe deva anumodantu, sabba sampatti siddhya, akasata chabumata deva naga mahiddika, punyang tang anumoditva charang rakantu sasanang. May the suffering ones be suffering fee, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit of ours that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share in this dispensation of ours. May they long protect dispensation. Share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddhist dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, friends. Until next time, may you have a spiritually successful and peaceful week. Suki Hotu, may you be happy. Practice well and be well. Good night, friends. When I end the stream, does that automatically kill the chat, or is the chat still available for a short time after? Do you guys, what is your experience when the stream ends? All right. I believe Steve is on our Discord. All right, friends.